Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So in this video, we are going to be ranking every single episode of Season 11, and we've done this for the past 3 seasons, so we're going to be doing this with Season 11 too. Season 11 is special though. Season 11 has 30 episodes, as you all know, the most for any Ninjago season yet. While we are going to be ranking all 30 episodes of the season, we are going to be keeping my statements pretty brief, only 15 seconds or so at most for each episode, because you don't want to be sitting here for hours on end while I talk about Season 11. But anyways, let's get them ranked. The Kaiju Protocol is not only the worst episode of the season, but the worst episode of the entire series. The concept was never going to work out given the time constraints for this episode, and so we end up getting a very sloppy and rushed episode. And also, Pixel's sacrifice was extremely cheesy and overdramatic. The episode breaks the plot at a horrible time and leaves no impact at all, meaning it can be skipped easily and is 100% pointless. Then we have Snake Catastrophe, which is definitely the second worst episode of the series. This episode features bland, dry, and boring side characters. The episode also has really bad humor, and that would be in the form of the advertisements. And then also when Asphira is monologuing. The monologue itself is okay, but then they ruined that at the end by interrupting it just for another failed attempt at comedy. Overall, a really bad episode. The 100th episode of Ninjago, and one of the worst, Questing for Quests. This episode is totally pointless and basically just a ninja running around, and like episode 8, it also suffers from really bad comedy. Whenever you expect a nice action scene with the ninja busting up crime in the city, the episode is basically like screw you, and so nothing happens. This is basically the entirety of the episode, and this was just very boring to watch. Wasted True Potential is the worst season premiere yet, and a terrible transition from March of the Oni to this. And the big problem is the very childish tone, which is present in the form of the hot tub, and of course, the lightning chicken as well. The fight with Wu was entertaining enough, but the episode itself just had a really bad idea, and was executed pretty poorly. The absolute worst is the first episode not to be animated in the traditional 3D style, and the animation is actually pretty good. I found that the fight scenes were fun to watch, but the big problem is the episode's concept itself and using the prisoners for this. It felt like a huge distraction from the main plot of the season, which was getting exciting at that time, and overall this episode, like the Kaiju Protocol, felt really pointless. The News Never Sleeps was a mediocre episode, and I'm glad that they brought Lil Nelson for that. I feel like that was a good idea, but Antonia was, she was fine, but she was kind of underwhelming as a character, and a lot of the episode, and here's the major problem, a lot of it just felt really cheesy or overdramatic, especially with the bikers having to jump over stuff, but it was an okay episode, just could have been improved in a few areas. And next up is the Explorers Club, which I don't feel is that much better than The News Never Sleeps, and this episode was also pretty silly, basically just the ninja fighting these middle-aged British guys, which I think was not the best idea, but you also have this cool mirror scene, which I feel is probably one of the better scenes from the chapter, and I like the foreshadowing for the Ice Emperor, but the rest of the episode is just kind of silly in a not-so-good way. And 23rd, we have A Cold Goodbye, the mediocre ending to the Fire chapter, and the highlights for this episode were definitely the setting up of the Neverrealm, and also the fight with Wu, but for the rest of the episode, it was pretty mediocre. The sudden conflict with Wu feels really rushed and unnatural, and haven't the ninja already learned not to be irresponsible? Also, the stealing the Traveler's Tea thing was generally pretty annoying to watch. The Traveler's Tree is definitely liked by some people for the focus on Cole, and I myself like this. However, I do not like that Cole is really dumbed down this episode, and this issue of his sensitivity feels like that of a child, especially with that first dream scene. However, the humor with Uthag and Boma is actually somewhat funny, and I also like the setting up for the next episode. Not the best episode here, but it is actually pretty okay. Episode 3, A Rocky Start, is basically a huge advertisement for the sets of Season 11, but this is probably one of the better episodes for filler in the season, and that is because it actually works with the plot pretty well, and it flows nicely unlike some of the other episodes. And the thing with this episode though is it does drag on a bit, and it is a little bit long, and in the end it's ultimately really unnecessary, and probably shouldn't have been this season at all. Under Siege is just a little bit better than A Rocky Start, and of course it isn't filler, so it has that going for it, but I did quite like the siege aspect of the episode, and I thought it was pretty cool with the ninja and Wu having to seek shelter underground, and I generally felt like Asphira and Char were pretty good in the episode too. I do not like the story between Kai and Wu, and I feel like it was pretty unnecessary, and again, one of the reasons why I dislike Kai in this season. Crag's Lament seemed like it would be yet another typical filler episode, but it actually takes a nice twist to that, and I like the idea of turning an enemy into a friend, and I thought that was a nice message. Again, I do like that Crag is not just yet another monster, and I also liked Cole's involvement in the episode too, but also the dark turn that they took on Crag's backstory. This episode isn't the best, and again, maybe it shouldn't have happened, but it was actually fairly good for what it was. The Belly of the Beast is probably the best of the filler episodes for the season, and that's because it actually has an interesting story and isn't just mindless fighting. I like the idea of Zane having to go inside the monster, and I thought the rock, paper, scissors tournament was a fun concept as well. I also like that we got to see another vision for Zane, and all in all, the episode actually had some interesting stuff going on to it, and it ended up being pretty fun to watch, which definitely sets it apart from the other filler. In 17, we have episode 17, how appropriate. Seriously though, this episode had really good animation and a lot of really cool shots of the Ice Samurai, and the battle with the Ice Samurai it was okay, I mean nothing too special, but I feel like it was enjoyable enough, and I also really liked the concept of the fire. The thing I didn't like was Kai in this episode, and yeah, just a general issue with the season, I really don't like Kai, and he just comes off as very whiny, especially in this episode. Booby traps and how to survive them is next. This episode introduces my least favorite character of the series, Clutch Powers, and I just really don't like him in this episode and the episodes that follow. But I also feel like the episode handled a lot of things really well, such as the release of Asphira and the fight that followed too. And I also like the dialogue in this episode generally well done, especially with Asphira and her interactions with the ninja. Overall, a pretty good episode. We're halfway through the rankings, congrats if you've made it this far. Ninja vs. Lava is a pretty good episode as well, just some classic ninja action here, and I thought that was nice to see them finally working together and solving challenges as a team. I do feel like the Pyro Viper stuff was pretty cool and should have been focused on a bit more, but what we got with the Pyro Vipers was good too. Good episode, but could have used a few minor tweaks. Episode 14 is number 14, the final and second time this is happening today. But anyways, I do feel like this episode is quite overrated, but nonetheless, I did like the Forbidden Spinjitzu action and this fight. And then I also like the scene with Wu and Asphira at the end, and how it portrayed Asphira as being pretty crazy. I do feel like the major problem is that Zane wipes out the entire army single-handedly in 30 seconds, otherwise though, it's a fine episode. Secret of the Wolf starts out pretty strongly with a really good Ice Emperor scene, and I really love the scene where he is punishing Gribfax and Vex's involvement as well. Then we have a pretty boring rock monster fight, again, really repetitive and stuff, didn't really care much about this at all, and then it ends introducing Akita, and Akita is introduced in a not so good way. I didn't like this whole teasing back and forth dynamic between them, but the rest of the episode is fine. The message is one of the first times in the season that actually conveys genuine emotion, and I think they did a really good job with Zane's message, and the voice acting was spot on. As for the rest of the episode, I do like Lloyd's adventures and his dynamic with the wolf, and as for the bird fight, it's pretty forgettable like a lot of the other monster fights in this season. Overall, a pretty strong episode, and I especially like again Zane's message. An Unlikely Ally is a very strong start to the Lloyd solo mission story, and I like some of the fights in this episode too, with the wolves, and then also the fight with the Ice Samurai in the mountains, with the fog and the stuff. I thought the animation was pretty nice. And there's also a Vex cameo, or a Vex appearance in this episode rather, where he does speak to the prisoner, which is a pretty cool scene too. This was definitely a nice start to Lloyd's journey. Powerless, as stated by the name, is the start of Kai's god-awful Powerless arc. And yeah, I mean, I just really dislike Kai in the season and the episode in general. He's just very whiny, and yeah, so that's no good. However, the rest of the episode is pretty good, and I really love the museum fight, and this is the first time we get to see Forbidden Spinjitzu in action. And who doesn't like some classic Ninja in the City action? I guess the only drawback would be Kai's arc, but the rest of the episode is pretty good. The season finale Awakenings, although fairly rushed, is a decent episode. The one thing I really didn't like was the conclusion to Kai and Nia's stories. Both of these just feel piled on top of each other and again very rushed. However, I really love Zane getting his memories back, definitely my favorite scene in the season, and I also like the happy ending stuff. Definitely Akita and Lloyd both deserve this for their characters, and although the episode was again fairly rushed, it was a pretty good episode. My Enemy, My Friend has some nice Ice Dragon action, and we get a first scene where the Ice Dragon is completely destroying the village, which I think was great for the plot. And then we also get another fight later on with Lloyd and Nikita, which is okay, I mean nothing too amazing, but I also like the Ice Emperor reveal. I feel like it could have been a little bit more dramatic, but I think what we got was pretty good too, especially with that final close-up shot of the Ice Emperor. Corruption was very different from what I was expecting, and like much of the season could have been so much better, but it was still fairly good for what we got. I like Vex in this episode, and definitely helps to build on him as a character, and explain his backstory a bit more. I enjoyed seeing Zane's journey into becoming the Ice Emperor, and especially those final scenes where he puts on the mask and descends the throne. I also really like the final fight in the throne room and the creation of the Ice Samurai. The Last of the Formlings is anime done right, and I especially love how it elaborates on Akita's character arc and shows how she got to where she is in the present. This scene of her unlocking her animal form was very good, especially with the setting of the clouds and the magical sounding soundtrack. And then we also had the other scene of her trying to get revenge on the Ice Emperor and Vex. Another really good scene. A very unexpected but very good episode. The Neverrealm is a great exposition episode, and I like the spotlight on the ninja while also elaborating on other aspects of the Neverrealm. And overall, this episode is great building for the realm. This episode introduces us to Great Lake and the other threats of the Neverrealm too, such as the wolves, but also wastes no time in setting up the Ice Emperor as a very mysterious character. This is an excellent scene and my favorite of the season for a while. Overall, excellent episode. The best way to describe ancient history would be as fun, because that's really all it is. A fun, action-packed episode that isn't dragged down by any of the other poorly written character arcs. I liked again the classic Ninja in the City action, and the fight with the Fire Fang was pretty cool, and we had some great visuals such as this one. Meanwhile, we also got to see some of our old Serpentine friends such as Acidicus and Scales, and again, it is always nice to see some old characters here and there. Never Trust a Human is the best episode of the Fire chapter, mainly due to the good pacing, which is a result of the good use of the format. Overall, this episode really helps to build on the Serpentine world, establishing this new Serpentine tribe in the Desert of Doom. We also get a great look at Asphyra as a character and how manipulative she is, and she was probably the best at the season during this flashback episode. I also really like the Forbidden Spinjitzu fight. All in all, very good backstory episode. The penultimate episode, Once and For All, will be the runner-up on this list, and I quite liked Akita's role in this episode, especially her interaction with the Ice Emperor. Meanwhile, we have a decent Ice Dragon chase. Again, nothing too amazing, but I thought it was still an enjoyable scene nonetheless. I also really liked the ending of the episode with Lloyd bursting into the throne room and declaring that it was time to finish it. This was definitely a really enjoyable episode that had me hyped for the finale. And so my favorite episode is A Fragile Hope, episode 28. This episode is really good and starts out with a very strong scene, with the Ice Emperor, Lloyd, and Vex, and these characters interacted so amazingly well with each other. The stuff with the other ninja is decent as well, as is the fight with the wolves, and there is some nice humor in there too. And I also like the ending of the episode with the establishing of a new resistance, which definitely again had me really hyped for the finale. And there you have it, my ranking of all 30 episodes of Season 11. This took me a while to make, so I would appreciate it if you were to subscribe and hit that like button. Anyways, thanks for watching. If you guys enjoyed, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, share with anyone ever you know, and leave your own rankings down in the comment section below, and I will see you next time.